Double G here with Carlos Toro. We are talking Devin Haney and Vasiliy Lomachenko. A great fight if you are a fan of technical, strategic, chess match boxing, for sure. There were a couple rounds in there that I thought were just excellent rounds. Great fight. Carlos, how's it going? I imagine, did you also watch Katie Taylor and the Chantel Cameron fight?
Yes, I did. In between my all day sessions of playing the new Zelda game, I was able to find a way to squeak in just watching the zone card and also the undercard, or at least the ESPN televised undercard, which actually ended up being a lot better than I expected. The first fight, Nico Ali Walsh, actually a pretty decent fight. That was a pretty decent fight, and then the main event of the prelims. Just if you haven't seen Junta Nakatani's knockout of Andrew Maloney, you got to see it.
Fantastic.
It's the best knockout. So far, it's the knockout of the year. It's absolutely incredible that the left hand that Junta Nakatani did to knock out Andrew Maloney. I mean, by the way, I don't know if you saw. It was reported that Andrew Maloney suffered 2 perforated eardrums.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah. It's
Jesus.
the power of Junta Nakatani is nothing to scoff at.
So, I mean, we kind of buried the lead just because I knew that there was a lot of stuff going on today. But video games and boxing sounds like a really fun Saturday, by the way.
It was after a long trip that month. Well, May has been a really busy month for me with all the traveling doing. So I'm glad I was able to like hunker down and actually enjoy like a relaxing Saturday afternoon.
So, Devin Haney gets the decision 116, 112, and 115, 113 times 2 were the scorecards. And when you and I were both talking on the Fight Game Media Discord, that we thought that the scores were going to be a little all over the place. And actually, the from the 3 judges, not very all over the place, pretty consistent. I was looking at a lot of the media folks. I think I saw Chris Mannix had the fight for Lomachenko pretty clearly. Lots of other things in the middle. I saw a few had Haney winning 115, 113. I had it smack dab right in the middle. I had a draw. So what do you think? Why do you think that this fight, is it the difference in the styles? Is it the savviness of Lomachenko? Why do you think the scores were kind of all over the place?
It really does. It goes down to essentially what you kind of look for when you're looking at who wins the round. If you're talking about, you know, who had the harder punches throughout the fight, and I you can certainly make the argument Haney was doing better work in that department, and
Yeah.
his body work was pretty good, especially in the middle stages of the fight. And Haney's body work was virtually non-existent. He was mostly head hunting. He was working the angles, as the broadcast like to mention it a few times. Or you can look at the speed and the different small little combos that Lomachenko was throwing throughout the fight, and he was just getting it. It also was not the typical Lomachenko fight where you usually wait a few rounds before Lomachenko really starts to get going, and he got to it almost from the very beginning. So the typical Lomachenko fight where he he takes a few minutes, a few rounds to warm up, and then he just starts blitzing his opponents left and right with incredible footwork and those short 2, 3, 4 combinations up close that's just almost impossible to defend. He was doing that, right from like round 2. And so when you look at those different styles, I think it is the clashing of the styles. You got the bigger, more physical and stronger Devin Haney, and then you have the slick, savvy Lomachenko, who, especially in a few of those rounds, he was actually being the more physical and more physically imposing fighter and backing up Devin Haney to the corner, which was something that I wasn't anticipating to happen a lot in this fight, for Devin Haney to be backed up a lot. But kudos to Devin Haney because he was able to box off the back foot very, very well. You know, in contrast to what he probably was hoping to do, was to do something with Teofimo Lopez dead when he beat Lomachenko, which was to basically impose his will on Lomachenko as the bigger fighter. But I think Lomachenko's learned from that, and Haney certainly made adjustments throughout the fight. It was a high-class chess match.
Okay, so if you are a casual boxing fan watching this fight, I imagine you were going to get sucked in to the idea that the savvy vet who is over 10 years, the young champion senior, he was Jimmy Connors at the US Open, the old dog with one last great match, fight, performance. I was falling into that as well because, we've seen all of Lomachenko's big fights, right? He comes to the pro game late because he was one of the best amateurs ever. And so we've seen him in everything big, and he's a stand-up guy. He takes, he takes all the big fights. Like, so that there's a narrative there that, man, if he has a chance, it's a great story for him to win. Like, it's a fantastic story if that whole thing comes out to play. And I'm not saying that that's why the Lomachenko cards were the way that they were. I'm just saying there was that which displays, the story of what people wanted. Because I was seeing that from some folks who, maybe they don't watch every fight. Maybe they watch a few big ones here and there. But I think that was what the story they fell in love with. And then on the other side, if you're more of a hardcore boxing fan and you sort of look at the big picture of what this fight was, Devin Haney, like you said, landing the harder shots, landing the body shots. Interestingly, the body shots didn't seem to pay off in the end like I thought they were going to pay off when I saw him targeting the midsection early. Like Lomachenko, some of it was guile, but I expected Lomachenko to really get tired at the end. And maybe in the 12th round, maybe he was a little bit tired, but that was not a problem. The long reach, the size, the strength, that was all Haney in the first half of the fight. But like you said, Lomachenko was able to turn that around a bit. And some of it was just him being a veteran, having more fights, understanding certain things. And I think Haney, it was interesting because the reach advantage that he had that was pretty clear early on, Lomachenko was able to kind of change that around. And it was almost a disadvantage for Haney because Lomachenko would throw a straight left and then he would fall towards Haney's left side. And so he would be in really close, and Haney could not then step back to find the distance to throw a punch. He was all of a sudden really tight. And then Lomachenko would either hold and they'd get a break, or he'd land with his open, with his hand that was available, and he would land a short thing. It always looked like Lomachenko was getting the last punch in. So I thought that was absolutely brilliant on his end. And I kind of wondered, because it just like the last 4 rounds, he just did it over and over and over. And I was kind of wondering, like, at some point, Haney is going to see this coming. He's going to take a step back. And when Lomachenko leans in, he's going to just let a right hand go. And he never did it. And so it was something that, maybe Lomachenko knew that this is just what he's not going to do. And this is what I'm going to be able to do. This is what we were talking about in the chess match side of things. But I thought that there were, I imagine that you saw Shakur Stevenson at the end. He thought Lomachenko won. It sounds like there's a little bit of beef there. I think he wants that fight. Robert Silva and I were talking about it on yesterday's podcast, Fight Game Podcast Extra. And he was saying that, he thinks Shakur is going to get that fight next. Now, I imagine Shakur saw some stuff in that fight where he's like, oh, okay, like that's something that, that I could actually work with. But when it comes to the idea of, like, we had this idea of bigger, stronger, longer, younger, why do you think Lomachenko was able to kind of erase that in the second half of the fight?
I think it ultimately comes down to, one, his footwork, which is you can argue bar none, not just in the 135-pound division, but in boxing in general, because the way he moves, it's not something that you can prepare, and it may be something that you can maybe get used to a little bit, but then Lomachenko throws something different at a later round, and you're not prepared for that, and you have to make adjustments for that. And then Lomachenko, I don't think Haney was fully prepared for the speed of some of those Lomachenko combinations. It almost felt like Haney would get hit, would have to basically gets pressured into a corner. He just doesn't get those punches off as fast as he would have liked, because I don't think he was prepared for that kind of speed for Lomachenko at this stage of his career. I think and it's almost impossible to prepare for someone like Lomachenko.
Yeah.
Because in certain rounds, the way he moves, and when he goes to your right, to Lomachenko's left, and vice versa, depending on how slow you are in processing all that, almost like you're fighting two different fighters at two different angles at the same time. So I think ultimately Haney thought he maybe could pressure Lomachenko and avoid that little internal battle, but the way Lomachenko was able to use his footwork and essentially prevent Haney from stepping forward, and instead he made Haney think. And in doing so, he wasn't moving forward, and instead was essentially forced to fight back and have to box out of the back foot, which, I mean, he did great in that aspect, but I don't think that was the intention of what Haney and his dad spent this entire training camp preparing.
If for the folks who may be watching live, if you have any thoughts on the chess match as we're talking about, shoot those comments in. We can talk about them. So there was a moment, I believe it was either before the 9th or the 10th, right around there, where Haney's dad was pretty confident in telling his son that you are winning this fight. And I was like, oh man, like, I wonder if he knows that, you know, the way that people are interpreting what's going on is vastly different, right? Like, he's watching from a specific perspective. And I was a little worried because I thought, he's gonna, maybe not work as hard. And I think, some of it was Lomachenko's work rate. Like, I think it was was it the 11th round? That was Lomachenko's best round. And like, just fantastic round for Lomachenko, maybe the best round for either guy in the fight. And so I was just a little worried that Haney was going to try and just survive. We've seen this historically in tons of fights where one guy thinks that he's got a wide lead, and he kind of lays back, and then he gets caught. It didn't happen here because of the scorecards, but did you have the same worry while you were watching it that, oh man, don't tell him that, like, because now he's not gonna really worry about winning these last few rounds?
I did find it a little bit weird because you heard that crowd. That was a pro Lomachenko crowd, for the most part. And judges, whether they do it consciously or not, they sometimes do get swayed by the crowd and how they react to certain punches. Some people who may not, some people who may not be super hardcore fans, they may not know this, but the way judges are located and they're looking at a fight, they're essentially kind of looking up. So sometimes they don't always get the best angle that TV gives us, the viewers. And so sometimes when you're looking at a very close fight and the angles might not be working to your favor when you're judging a fight, then you hear the crowd just sort of chant real loud. There were several moments where Loma got a few good shots in and the crowd just exploded for that. That you would think that, okay, it's close. There were a lot of swing rounds for the first 10. It's impossible to tell whether or not you would you're ahead on the scorecards. And let's be honest, and as it turns out, Devin Haney did not have this fight in the bag, because according to the scorecards, he did need it to sweep the 12th round, and he did. Otherwise, it would have been a majority draw.
So Timothy Bradley was talking about how Haney would throw his jab and then he would not move his head, which made his head a target for the counter left hand by Lomachenko. And as I was watching this, Bradley and Andre Ward, you have guys who understand this stuff at just a different level than anybody else watching. And I thought, I was like, I wanted him to expound on that a little bit more. I wanted him to kind of give us the reason why. And I had an idea, and I wanted to get your thoughts on why Haney was, throwing that jab and then just kind of leaving his head out there, because I saw it as he was almost mesmerized by Lomachenko's movement and his footwork, and he was like not wanting to get caught. So he's like just making sure that he's scanning and trying to feel where things are coming, and he's thinking a little bit too much about it. Now, again, if we had Tim Bradley on this, then he would tell us, kind of a little bit more what he was talking about. But what did you see in that sense? Because I can imagine Lomachenko mesmerizes a lot of guys, because it's sort of similar to how Pacquiao. Bradley also mentioned Pacquiao as kind of really hard to see. Like, you think he's on the outside and you get caught with a shot that you don't really see coming. What was your thought on what Bradley meant there?
I had similar thoughts, to be honest, and I only dare because I don't know what goes on in Devin Haney's head. I don't know what goes on Bill Haney's head. But the way I kind of look at it, maybe, and this is just theory, but it's possible that Haney was just really trying to. He was allowing Lomachenko to sort of try and come close and maybe try to time his movement, because as great as Lomachenko's movement is, there have been some very, very few occasions throughout Lomachenko's career where his opponents was able to time his footwork and his movement and able to land a really big shot. And one thing that in one moment that particularly I can remember was when Lomachenko fought Jorge Linares a few years ago. And Lomachenko got hit real hard with a big right hand, where it was a straight right, and it was as Lomachenko was kind of moving sideways, and then all of a sudden he moves forward, takes a step forward, and Linares just bashes him with one straight right hand. So I don't know if maybe that's what Haney was trying to look for, trying to see it, because the right hand was landing. But it wasn't hurting Lomachenko and the fight. Maybe you saw it differently, but I didn't see a single moment in the fight where Haney really, really hurt Lomachenko. For as good as the right hand was landing and the body work was there, there wasn't a point where Lomachenko just kind of got stumbled and staggered. Haney, on the other hand, was closer to that, especially in that 11th round, but it did kind of look like maybe he was trying to look for that small window of opportunity.
Right. That makes sense too. Definitely. When Haney was hurt, I felt he was hurt more out of surprise and maybe caught kind of in a bad moment. Maybe it was more of getting hit and he's a little bit off balance, or he didn't expect it, so he looked like hurt. I don't know. Like, a lot of Lomachenko's early flurries were just kind of flurries with nothing on him, like he was trying to score some points. And that's why I think I scored the fight so heavily in the first 5 rounds for Haney. I think I had it 4-1 Haney, and it was mostly because I saw Lomachenko trying to do a little Sugar Ray against Marvin, in just trying to steal segments of the rounds, and Haney was more controlling. But then it just completely flipped, and that's when Lomachenko started, more towards the later half of the last 6 rounds. But he started to take control in a bigger way. And I agree with you in that then he started throwing harder punches, and they definitely landed more. And I think, I don't know what CompuBox said, but I imagine Lomachenko landed more punches than Haney did. He was definitely throwing more punches than Haney was. There was also a lot of, now this is a southpaw versus a right-handed fighter, and there were a lot of moments where I was almost sure at some point that there was going to be a headbutt in this fight because they were running into each other. There was a moment, I don't remember what round it was, but it was a little bit later where it looked like they went knee to knee and then Lomachenko went to the ground. And I was like, oh man, that looks awful. Like, what if he's hurt, from something like that? That looked like it was a possibility to really change what the fight was. Thankfully, nothing happened to that extent. Haney got warned a few times, hitting in the back of the head, I think holding maybe the back of the head as well. Lomachenko said that he thought that stuff was all clean, that stuff was all fine. But there were moments where the fight was a little messy. There was some roughhousing, there was some wrestling. It was almost like Haney was trying to prove something, like he did with that push yesterday at the weigh-in, as like, dude, I'm too strong for you. And Lomachenko was just like, nah, like that's not going to happen. And there was like some real gamesmanship there. What did you see when that stuff was happening?
First of all, I thought Devin Haney had much better gamesmanship than Grant Williams did yesterday against Miami, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, look, this was a much more physically awkward fight than I would have thought because of all the holding. Because there was so much Harvey Dodge having to separate both fighters that it almost came to a surprise, and it was weird to an extent that almost felt like, I don't know. You can make the argument that it could have stopped, like all that holding maybe could have stopped Lomachenko's momentum, where he basically was forced to reset every single time. And Haney, it goes back to what you mentioned at the start, that where it gets to where Lomachenko gets so inside close quarters where Devin Haney almost couldn't throw a punch out there. Mm-hmm. So the physical aspect of things, I think that Lomachenko wanted to also prove something to Devin Haney after the shove, that Haney may have gotten the last word at the weigh-ins with the shove, but I think that the faster start and the physicality of it all contributed to Lomachenko just also wanted to try to one-up Haney in that department, because I think Lomachenko really did learn a lot from the Teofimo Lopez loss. Because even though he practically almost won the entirety of the second half of the fight, the fact that it took him so long to get going, the fact that he just didn't have an answer for Teofimo Lopez size and reach, that it almost felt like a proving test for Lomachenko to have to get rough like that with Devin Haney.
By the way, how did you score it? I didn't even ask you how you scored it.
I had it 115, 113 for Lomachenko, though. I'd have to look back. I might even be convinced to score it even, or even 115, 113 the other way.
There's
it was a close fight.
More than half of those rounds were up in the air to me.
Yeah.
And like, razor's edge, razor thin differences in the fight. And because the styles are so different, it really could be what you were looking for. And sometimes when I score fights, I watch them and I go, okay. It's hard doing so on TV, because when you're there in person and you're there ringside, you can actually see more visibly what scores and what doesn't. You can see the defense a lot better as well. And so sometimes when I score fights, I go, okay, I just don't want to be fooled by what's going on. I don't want the savviness and the guile and the veteranness of a fighter to fool me into thinking that the fight is one way when it may be the other way. So I'm kind of trying to defend that as well. So that's possibly why I may have given Haney some rounds early that a lot of people gave to Lomachenko, because I just saw like, okay, there's a flurry where he threw like 4 punches in a row that looked very pretty. I'm not quite sure he really hit Haney, well with it, but it actually looks like a scoring punch. And then I would see Haney throw 2 right hands to the body and you hear the thud, and I go, okay, like that means a lot more than the other thing that Lomachenko just did. Like when you were watching this, do you like what was it about what Lomachenko was doing that made you give him some of those close rounds?
There were a couple of things, and really, when you break down the four criteria of scoring judgment, which were off the top of my head, I think was defense, clean punching, ring generalship, and blanking on the fourth one. but essentially, it boils down to Lomachenko basically commanding the ring for portions of that fight. And I mean, the first 5 rounds, it was so different because here's the thing: the third round actually, no, it wasn't the third round, it was the fourth round. The fourth round was actually very interesting to me because I scored it for Loma because I thought that for most of the first 2 minutes of the fight of that round, Lomachenko was maneuvering around the ring very well. Haney didn't have much of an answer. He was forced to sort of fight off the back when he was doing well for the most part. And then at the last minute of that round, that's when Haney finally understood, okay, the right to the body is been my best punch and is going to be my best punch for the next few rounds.
Yeah.
And I think, and in that alone, that was kind of a microcosm of the entirety of the fight, where you can say Lomachenko did this so well, but at the same time, almost immediately, Haney was able to respond and vice versa, which is why it kind of contributed to so many swing rounds because it was a coin flip. To put it bluntly, I'm been looking at the scorecards. The last 6 rounds, and mind you, again, we're talking about Dave Moretti's 116, 112 scored, and Tim Cheatham's 115, 113 scored. Tim Cheatham scored the last 6 rounds 4-2 in favor of Lomachenko, and Dave Moretti scored the last 6 rounds 5-1 in favor of Haney.
Yeah, that doesn't really make
So
sense.
it just shows like how much of a coin flip it was, and some rounds Haney finished strong, and some rounds Lomachenko finished strong. It was just that kind of a fight.
So you because we're doing this, we're not watching the press conference, but good buddy Jason Hagholm has been tweeting the press conference. So Lomachenko, in his post-fight interview, he was clearly disappointed. He thought he won the fight.
You can tell even before the press conference where he was in his locker room and he was just devastated, right before they threw a towel over his head. Because he was just beyond devastated.
Yeah, he would not give any credit to Haney. And he basically said that he thought he won the fight. It got worse than that in the press conference. So according to Jason, his tweets, Lomachenko's manager says that they're going to appeal the decision, called it the biggest robbery in the daylight. Haney's team got Christmas in the summer. Okay, now the promoter of this fight, Big Bob, he could probably, he could put some water out on this fire if he wanted. Instead, he says he's the promoter, so he won't comment on the fight, but people around him thought it was a one-sided Lomachenko win. Loma's manager says that they protested Dave Moretti on being a judge, but the athletic what is it called? The Las Vegas, the Nevada State Athletic Commission said that Moretti is one of their best judges. Lomachenko said that he controlled this fight and every round. It's a big question as to what happened. And then he says he believes it's Haney's last fight at 135, and I would imagine so as well. And so so they think that it was a clear victory for Lomachenko. Now I don't know. I didn't expect Lomachenko to say that he thought he lost, but there's not even and then Haney's dad said that they won convincingly in the post-fight locker room as well. So I don't imagine anything comes out of this, but are you surprised by how much the Lomachenko side thinks that this is a robbery?
I can understand them being upset with the decision. I can understand uh, wanting to see if they can try to do something about it. But to call it a robbery, and mind you, I scored it for Lomachenko. I had Lomachenko winning, and I didn't think it was a robbery at all.
Yeah.
Now, they were kind of right in basically protesting Dave Moretti, and I know and I know some people were basically they were and say, oh man, is he going to be a wild card or what? And of course, he's the one judge who gave 8 rounds to Devin Haney.
Yeah.
Which by the way, I had it's hard to convince me 8 rounds for Devin Haney. I suppose mathematically you can because of how many swing rounds there were.
I think you would have had to give Haney a lot of those early rounds, unless you were like Moretti and you saw some of those rounds that we saw clearly for Lomachenko. I think Robert Silva had 116, 112, but I don't know what his round by round breakdown was as far as which rounds he saw for Haney. But you know, like that's the part where I was like, okay, that's what I don't see is 5 of the last 6 for Haney, when the 11th round was the widest round, I think, of the night. So that had to go to Lomachenko.
Yeah, that was let me be 100% sure. Yes, yeah, the 11th Lomachenko swept the 11th. And that's about it. The only he swept the 9th and the 11th, which I agree with. I thought if you were to the 11th was Lomachenko's best round. If you had to go try to decipher what would be the second best round, the 9th would be also the best round, because that was also the one where Haney wasn't hurt, but he was wobbled a little bit in the center of the ring.
That's the round. Round 9 was where I was like, okay, Lomachenko's playing a little possum here. He looks tired, and then all of a sudden, boom, he throws that left hand. And I thought that was Haney's most defensive round, where he just was not punching all that much. And I was like, okay, he's really thinking that, you know, this guy is going to catch him with something. So he's just going to make sure that he doesn't get caught. But that, you know, if that round is clearly Lomachenko, 11th round is clearly Lomachenko. So yeah, I don't see where Haney gets 5 of those last 6 in any way. But you know, that's why you have 3 judges, right? It's a subjective thing. Now, if one of the other judges had it for Lomachenko, and then, you know, so the other judge had it a little bit closer for Haney, then Moretti's scorecard kind of plays into the decision a little bit more. But because, you know, he swept him on 3 scorecards, it doesn't. But yeah, I do. What is how do the commissions look at that stuff? Like, are these judges graded in any way? Like, how does that work?
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, to be perfectly honest. By the way, I am mistaken. Not the 9th round that I thought that that was Lomachenko's best round. I don't know where I got that from, but either way, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, God, they are so behind the times and they're trotting out all these judges. I will give them credit bringing in Harvey Dock. I think that was a very good call. Wasn't a big fan of bringing out Dave Moretti as a judge, but Nevada needs to do, and really U.S. boxing needs to do a better job at trying to get younger and better judges than the ones we got. I mean, I remember the era of Adelaide Bird in the mid to late 2010s that we all had to suffer through, but yeah, overall there were a lot of it goes again back to the whole discussion about the robbery. It wasn't a robbery because it was a very tough fight to score, but overall I thought that I had no problems with the final scores, even though I disagreed somewhat with the 116, 112.
Yeah,
I thought that that overall that Nevada that the judges most, you know, they were justifiable in their decision, but as far as like how they get these judges they get these judges out there, and you've heard this expression, but boxing is a bit of an old boys club.
Yeah,
where and I've had, and listen, I've know people who, you know, out in California who've been trying to, you know, get more into into being a referee and a judge, and it's been almost impossible because the commission is so dead set on these guys that have been doing it for 30, 40 years. And to a certain point, you just need to find something. You just got to find something different. I don't know how Nevada really looks at it, other than maybe after the fight, if they really feel compelled to, you get Bob Bennett, the chairman of the committee, or I don't know what his exact title is, but you get Bob Bennett, maybe talk with those judges after the fight and try to see where they are coming from, and then they'll just buy whatever explanation they get. You know, and some referees and some judges, they are not, they don't even, they may have done it for 30, 40 years, doesn't mean that they need to be in this position right now.
Shakur Stevenson, we mentioned that he came out after the fight was over. I mean, if Haney is going to move up, can they make that fight? Would it be at 140? Like, is it like what's going to happen next based off of this fight? You think?
So this can go one of number of ways. Well, one, I don't know what the current status of Devin Haney's promotional deal with Top Rank is. I believe this was his last fight.
I think you're right about that.
I believe this was his last fight. Haney can play this a number of different ways. It is interesting that Haney was immediately after the fight, when asked about what's next and everything, and he just basically said, gonna go back to the drawing board. It's gonna take some time to do yada yada. But it was interesting. He did mention Shakur Stevenson's name, the only name that he brought out. Didn't mention, thinking about maybe moving to 140 or staying at 135, but he mentioned Shakur Stevenson. I think that could be, and I think that might be an option. I don't know what. I think a lot of different things need to be worked out as far as, as Devin Haney. Would Devin Haney be open to coming back and signing multiple fights, multiple fight deal? You almost kind of have to, because again, Haney's not long for 135. This may have well been his final night at 135. So if he goes to 140, it's kind of an open season right now, promotional wise, because and there's almost no bad answer with where a top guy like Devin Haney would go if he's thinking about what's out there for 140. Because if you look at Matchroom, they got Regis Prograis, they got Jack Catterall, they got Liam Paro. Prograis has the WBC title, and I know Matchroom is making a heavy push to try and get Subriel Matias, who's the IBF champion. PBC, there's always that possibility of a Gervonta Davis fight that would be more than possible as a 140 pounder, or it's like a 138 catch weight or whatever. Then they also got a champ, Ismael Barroso. I'm sorry, not Ismael Barroso. That was wishful thinking on my part. Rolly Romero, who won his belt.
You're talking about the fight from last weekend.
Yes. Who won his WBA title last week with one of the worst stoppages I can remember in recent memory on Showtime. He's fighting under the PBC umbrella with Mayweather Promotions, and then you got Top, and so it's kind of an open field for Devin Haney. So if he chooses to stay at Top Rank, there's a lot of really good in-house fights you can make. You could make Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney. You can make Josh Taylor versus Devin Haney. And maybe, depending on how the chips fall, you can even go super long-term booking and go Shakur and Devin at 140. Because I can absolutely see Shakur still building his body up to be at least a 140-pounder. So there's a lot of ways you could do this. And I think Top Rank would try to do everything to try to get Devin Haney back on board and sign another deal, because Haney was a surprisingly really good TV draw for Top Rank. The first fight against George Kambosos, I think the average viewership of the entire broadcast was like just a shade under 1 million, and the actual main event did over 1 million, which is surprisingly, given it was two guys who have never been a top main eventer on a platform like this. They both were main eventers on the Zone, but that doesn't really have the same reach as ESPN.
Right.
So getting that, so they did really good numbers. The rematch, which no one needed to watch, and it was the least anticipated rematch I can remember. That still did really good numbers. That still did in the broadcast that averaged like in the 700,000s, which was a pretty solid number for what it was. So there's a lot of ways you can do this. Now, I think I think Haney might also want to wait until we see pay-per-view numbers to see is it high enough to where Haney wouldn't have to try to negotiate more pay-per-view dates as an option, proving, hey, look what I did on TV, look what I did on pay-per-view. So there's a lot. I think that a lot of stuff we still don't know yet, and I think that it's going to take a little bit of while before we figure out where Haney might go. Uh, for me personally, I would, if we're talking about if he's sticking to 135, I would love if he stays at top rank, because I think there's still some good fights. Maybe mainly Shakur Stevenson, but if he goes anywhere above 135, Matchroom has some great fights. PBC, if you can do Tank versus Devin Haney, which I don't know how attractive of a fight that is compared to Ryan Garcia, because Ryan had such a huge social media following, bigger than Devin Haney. But I think that would still be a pretty solid pay-per-view. But I don't know.
I mean, Tank is clearly the A side in that that draw.
Yeah, I think so too.
So, we were talking about this when we talked about Tank and Ryan Garcia, which is, we had this kind of like, this top four at 135, and Tank did a great job of, he beat Ryan pretty easily, I would say. Like, there wasn't, it wasn't as competitive as something like this, but Haney and Tank, they kind of come out on top here. Watching both of those fights, I went into this thinking like, okay, I want to see how good Haney really is. Now, this could solely be the bad matchup, the savvy vet, matchup that gave him trouble. But man, I sort of feel like Tank would give him similar problems.
Yeah, and here's the thing: Davis may not be as fast a fighter as Lomachenko, but he is several times a harder puncher than Devin Haney. And if Devin Haney got wobbled up a little bit by Lomachenko, then imagine what a Gervonta Davis can do. Now, right now, if you're to ask me who win, the gun to the head question, I would pick Gervonta Davis to win. Yeah. Because I think Gervonta Davis, aside from his power, I still think even right now, coming out of the Ryan Garcia fight, I still think that his ring IQ is somewhat underrated, because we fall in love so hard with the power that he produces, but he does an exceptional job at setting up his punches, and he doesn't allow himself to get hit the way Lomachenko got hit tonight. And Devin Haney, while he does have some decent pop in his hands, does not have the power to sort of make Gervonta Davis kind of sit back and think, okay, I need to do something different because my usual strategy might not work. Right. And I could see Gervonta Davis kind of walking down Devin Haney the same way Lomachenko did in some of those rounds, where he forced Haney to sort of fight off the back foot. And if Gervonta Davis can do that, then I don't want to say it's game over, but that's essentially where Gervonta Davis excels the best, is when he can corner his opponents, and he is able to get his pickings wherever. He can attack you with the body for 10 different ways, and he can also deliver some devastating one-punch knockouts.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, the fact that we're talking about this means that there's interest, there's intrigue. I think that Gervonta Davis Ryan Garcia fight did a lot of really good things for boxing when it comes to, you know, the fan base and growing it. I saw a lot of people who, you know, they got that fight because there was so much hype. And then this fight is not going to do anywhere near the business that fight did, but there was intrigue because this fight is not that much long. It wasn't that long after that fight. Plus, you just had the Canelo fight, so that, you know, he's the biggest star in the game, so there was interest there. So it was a pretty good couple of months for boxing, I thought. And so, you know, whatever we get next, hopefully that there's some momentum for it, and I'm actually pretty excited about you know, kind of where we are right now. Before we get out of here, because I didn't get to see the Katie Taylor fight, I wanted to get your thoughts on what happened and how that fight was.
So, for those of you who didn't know, I'm just gonna paint the background of this fight. So basically, Katie Taylor, Chantel Cameron for the undisputed junior welterweight title, which was held by Chantel Cameron. Originally, this was supposed to be Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano 2, but Serrano got injured, so Matchroom scrambled together to get a backup fight going because they didn't want to cancel it because that was Katie Taylor's homecoming because she had never fought professionally in her native Ireland before. Yes. So Chantel Cameron she won a close decision. I think it was majority decision. It was 96-94, 96-94, and 95-95. I saw it closer to like 97-93 for Chantel Cameron. Chantel Cameron was just, in some ways, doing a better job at essentially imposing her will on Katie Taylor in the first half of the fight than either Haney and Lomachenko did, because Katie Taylor was forced to kind of fight off the back foot a little bit. She was not dictating the pace of the fight like she normally does. Chantel Cameron was really putting a lot of pressure, a lot of forward pressure on Katie Taylor. Some of those punches from Cameron was really affecting Katie Taylor because she was bruised up pretty early on in the fight, and Katie Taylor was essentially was forced to go all out in the second half of the fight when normally she's at that point she's kind of broken down her opponents, and it's the opposite. And you even tell after the fight in her body language, the way she was responding when she lost that fight.
Yeah.
Now they're gonna do a rematch because Katie Taylor I think she has a contractually option to exercise a rematch. Don't ask me how the challenger moving up in weight has that contractual right, but when you're Katie Taylor, I guess you can do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good fight. It was actually a good fight. If you like Katie Taylor fights, and I think this one will not disappoint. There was a lot of fighting inside of the ring. There was not much stuff where either fighter was up against the ropes. It was a good fight. I had no problem with Chantel Cameron winning. Bit of a problem with that 95-95 score there. But yeah.
Hometown.
Yeah, Chantel Cameron, what a win. And I mean, you can now really make the case with the run that she's been at 140 and winning those titles. It was essentially like a mini tournament to crown an undisputed champion at 140, and she fought exceptionally well in getting to that crown. You can make now the argument she's in the conversation for best female pound for pound boxer right now on the planet, like in that quartet of Clarissa Shields, Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, now Chantel Cameron, and Alicia Baumgartner. I mean, that's right now your top five at women's boxing. I don't think anyone can really make an argument for that top five.
We are in May, so we are heading into the summer. What are some summer fights that you're really looking forward to?
So next week, we actually have a couple of really good fights on DAZN and ESPN Plus, although they're probably going to be clashing against each other because they're both in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Mauricio Lara versus Lee Wood. which was for Mauricio Lara's featherweight title, which was Lee Wood had a phenomenal fight against Michael Conlon, who in the fight against Mauricio Lara was quite something. Lara beat Lee Wood hard in their first fight to win the title. And Michael Conlon's going to be on the other title fight on ESPN Plus that same day for the IBF featherweight title. So there's a possibility, there's an intrigue as far as a possibility for long-term unification rematch on the line. Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez on, I think it was June 10, which is a really good fight because I think this will be because it's interesting because neither guy, Lopez and Josh Taylor, they're both coming off of wins and their stock could not be any lower.
Right.
So it's weird to call a fight of this magnitude a crossroads fight, but it is, because if Taylor wins, then he's bounced back, arguably to the top at 140 pounds, and Teofimo Lopez. Then all the stuff that we've been seeing about Teofimo Lopez is kind of spiraling out of control with his career since the loss to Kambosos. Then that's just going to continue to ring true. Naoya Inoue versus Stephen Fulton. The last time we were doing this show, I don't think we had a confirmed date.
Right.
And if there were, maybe I missed it, but we gotta have to confirm July 25th in Japan on ESPN Plus. That to me is the best fight you can make, arguably right now in boxing, in my opinion. Naoya Inoue, the former undisputed bantamweight champion, who's now up to 4 weight classes where he won a belt, moving up to bantamweight, super bantamweight, to fight who I think is a somewhat underrated pound for pound guy in Stephen Fulton, who has been taking charge at 122, and to me he's the top guy in that division. And this is like in a very rare occasion where you have the American champion travel all the way to Japan to face their challenger. And to me, both of these guys have styles that are super fan friendly. Stephen Fulton is a guy that that just exists to fight in phone booths. And now Inoue, the combination of power and skill that he has for someone that small is otherworldly. And Robert Silverman, back in the old days, the Pound for Pound podcast, I've said this time again, Naoya Inoue is on his way he's already, to me, the greatest Japanese boxer of all time. And he's well on his way to being in the conversation for and being a very, very short list, one of the greatest lower weight boxers in history, because the pure talent that we have seen from Naoya Inoue is otherworldly. Like, we haven't seen this since like a young Chocolatito, which was at this point like 20 years ago. That's how long it's been.
Wow. All right. Well, got a lot of stuff coming up that we can look forward to. And, you and I will maybe get back and do this again. I want to thank you for being available. I know that you've had a busy week, but, I was like, maybe if I ask him, maybe he'll be available, because this is just fun for me. Boxing is such a big part of my childhood. And because I'm following and covering so many other sports with all the podcasts, a lot of times some of the fights kind of fall off for me, but these last 2 big fights that we've done this for, I've been back in, just been like, man, this has been a lot of fun. So thanks again. So for Carlos is Carlos Toro on Twitter. I think you're at Carlos Toro Media. Is that correct? Yep. So you can follow Carlos. Anything cooking, or just work is just taking up so much time right now?
Right now, it's just been weird because of all the travel. Because last week, for the past week, I've been in Puerto Rico. Now, this starting on Wednesday, I'm going to be in Minneapolis for what's the holiday we got coming up? Is it Memorial Day?
Memorial Day, yes.
Okay. Living in the U.S. for 7 years, and I still haven't fully gotten all these U.S. holidays down pat. But yeah, right now it's everything's kind of in a weird whole holding period until I get all my travel done. But June, I'm hoping to sort of get a lot more stuff going between. Maybe
Cool.
maybe doing some more boxing work and some writing, doing more stuff on Twitch. I think like right now, I just want to get this travel done, all this traveling done before I can finally get started to work on some stuff that I've been wanting to do for a while.
All right, find him on Twitter and on Twitch, and he's maybe playing some Zelda on Twitch. Is that the?
It had not occurred to me to do that, to be perfectly honest, but maybe I should.
All right. Thanks to everybody who checked in with us on the live stream, and obviously to everyone who is listening. So for Carlos, I'm Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.